the moon and back and across the Milky Way. It's Cosmick Talk with Chris Natalini and Mick Michaels. News, movies, and more.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cosmick Talk. This is Season 1, Episode 1. I am here with my co-host, Chris Natalini.
Yeah, back again, baby!
And I am Mick Michaels. Welcome, everyone, to a brand new limited series show. Chris, how are you, sir?
I'm doing awesome, man. It's so weird to hear Season 1, Episode 1. I have a little PTSD when I hear that.
Yeah, it's like, uh-oh, what happened? Did we lose everything?
Am I starting over?
Exactly.
I just got the hang of all my equipment.
Yeah, exactly. I was a little worried about how I was going to pull off that intro, but I figured, you know what, I'll just go with old hat and just change out some of the words.
Exactly. I'm doing great, brother. At the time of recording this, it is warm. We are actually in summer temperatures, yet it is not summer, but I am enjoying it. It's been good so far. It's been very good. I'm happy to see some sun, because we had a really, really rainy few weeks. But here we are. How about you, man? How's things with you?
Just staying busy, man. Staying busy. Here we are. Another show. Something new. Giving it a shot. Seeing what happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, we talked about it and we thought it'd be kind of interesting because there's so many great shows and documentaries and new records coming out. And we kind of wanted to expand the cosmic universe. You know, because there are some things that we don't get to talk about on the Cosmic Voice albums per se, and you know there's so many great documentaries coming out because that's just the way, you know, these streaming services have worked, and documentaries have become a thing now, especially of musical documentaries, you know. So it's been a pretty hot topic, and you and I discussed it. We say let's do a small little show over the summer to keep the cosmic universe full.
Yeah, well, you know, it's like we get to take it upon ourselves to talk as fans, right? People that are into something. I'm sure probably some of the other show will kind of filter in here somehow as we talk about stuff. I'm hoping that's not the case. I just want us to kind of just banter back and forth. Well, but you know what I'm saying. You know how, because over the course of the last couple of years, I've gotten more into listening to other podcasts. And as we talked about in a couple of the shows on the Cosmic Voice, I do a lot of YouTube surfing, and there's a lot of channels that I'm, you know, and I thought to myself a couple times, like, hey, you know, maybe we should just kind of venture into some other stuff, non-music business related. So, and talk about some fun stuff and things that we like and maybe we don't like, and given our reasons why, not have to really bring up anything else other than that. But that was at least my thinking, and I think you were thinking something of similar. So there was a lot of thinking going on. What we have accomplished with it, I'm not sure, but we have finally gotten to hit record, and here we are, Cosmic Talk. And that's really all it is, peeps. It's just talk.
That's it, man. And that's one thing, when we do the Cosmic Voice, you and I are doing it as players in the game, where the Cosmic Talk, we actually are we're just fans. Like we're the real guys behind the business. You know what I mean? Just talk about things that we enjoy and, things that we're into. I think it's interesting. And,
the tagline, the tagline is music, movies, and more.
Exactly.
More could be cheeseburgers, it could be hot dogs, it could be bacon on the grill, whatever you want it to be. We'll try to talk about it and give you our likes, dislikes, or, whatever about it. So
yeah, I agree.
Here we go. So
here we go.
I think what we were going to chat with on this first one is we're going to talk about Judas Priest and their new album and the tour and just, 50 years of swinging that hammer to the anvil. What do you think, bud? Man. What's your take on it? What do you see? What do you feel?
Man, and it's funny, too, because you and I, we talked about the day Panic Attack was released as a single. And, it's so funny how things change as time goes on, right? Like, when they first premiered the album cover art, a very trippy, very tie-dye looking shield, and they put out Panic Attack, which starts with, like, this really weird 80s synthesizer. And then the song just kicks in. And I remember messaging you going, oh, my God, have you heard the new Priest yet? And if I remember correctly, I don't know if you were into it right off the bat. Like, didn't it take you a couple listens to dig it?
Yeah, I didn't. At first, I was like, I I don't know. It's like, is it the same over and over again? I did say that to you. I said, I'm going to listen to it again. I go, I may not be in the right state of mind, and chances are I probably wasn't. If I kind of remember that day, there was like 100 things, and I was hearing it, but not really hearing it. So, I guess I was expecting something else, and maybe that was it.
And how do you feel about it months after, and now the album is released?
Maybe a couple days after, I actually sat down and I listened to the song, and I was like, holy moly, maybe I missed something here. The album, I think, is great.
The album is stellar.
It's stellar. Man. I mean, listen, I'm going to be honest. There's probably maybe a couple songs that are not as intense as the other one. Like Firepower, I think, from start to finish, I like the entire album. Maybe one song falls short to the other ones. But on this one, this is what I quickly picked up after the first listen. Like, there is definitely some throwback sounds or callbacks to some, like, Leather Rebel. There's one of the songs, I can't recall what it is right now, but you could actually sing Leather Rebel over it, the chorus of it. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
You know, I mean, again, if you're going to steal from somebody, steal from yourself. Who cares, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
You know,
right,
I mean, right. I was recently told, like, oh, you don't want to compete with yourself as a musician. I was like, and I'm still, that was weeks ago. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. Like, if you're going to compete with anybody, you compete with yourself. It seems like it's a win-win. I mean, go back over time when the Beatles had 3 or 4 songs in the top 10. Here we go with the music business, right? But anyway, that's the point. So if you're going to steal from somebody, because I know there's videos out there goes, these bands stole from themselves. What? It doesn't even make sense. So anyway, but the one song sounds like a Black Sabbath song, like sounds like an Ozzy type song, even the way Halford's singing it.
Okay.
But that's cool because I think he has this thing with Ozzy. Now, when you and I seen him in concert just a few weeks ago, he made it a point to bring up that Ozzy got a nomination into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I definitely think there's connection between the two. So doing that, maybe it's a sideways homage to him or something like that. I think it's, kind of cool.
Yeah, I do too. And I mean, if you remember, if you have read his books, and even to this day, they still come out. Not even come out, like the lights are still on in the venue, but they sort of come out to War Pigs. So he definitely has that Ozzy connection. Even in his books, he talks about how much he loved Ozzy and Sabbath. And when I say him being Rob Halford. So I agree. And I think I might have said this to you, when I got the CD, when I got the physical copy, I'm looking through the booklet and I'm like, because I wasn't crazy about the cover at first. I'm totally into it now because I get it. It wasn't until I received the CD that I opened up the booklet and there was all these like soldiers and all these like swords and all that. And I'm like, oh, okay, well now the cover kind of makes sense. And then I go, okay. And then the colors make sense to me because you could see them suckers from across the room. Like, when you and I went to see them a few weeks ago in concert, I could see the merch booth from like up down the hallway. And only because, there's this huge, big tie-dyed picture on a black shirt. And honestly, visually, you want people to see your shirt and go, oh, I know exactly whose shirt that is. If they were doing that for the reason, or they just liked how it was created for them, if they picked the colors for a reason, or if it's just what they went with, it was a smart idea either way, because you could see those colors from a mile away. And then they had that, when we saw them live, they had that big banner, in the middle of the stage with the words from Invincible Shield. So they really went full-fledged with that whole thing. But I really love the record. I totally understand what you're saying about Firepower and the comparison to it. I do feel that there are a little bit of slower paced songs. I kind of go, I kind of feel like they're filler. But that could also be because the other songs are so strong. Crown of Horns, I adore. I love that song. I liked it when they released it as a single. And there's something about the melody in it, his vocal pattern. I don't know. It just gets me. Every time it's on, I just crank that sucker. There's nothing special about the song. It's just another pre-song in their catalog. I was glad they did it live, but that's one of my favorite off the record. And then Panic Attack, which I liked right from the get-go, from when I heard it. So, yeah, I was super excited about it. We had gone to see them in concert, and they were just 90 minutes of pure metal badassery. Rob Halford looked like he was having a great time. He smiled a few times. Them guys know what they're doing. Obviously, they're super professional. They were just great, man. Just 90 minutes, no filler. Every song hit the mark. They sounded great. It's Priest, man. It's Judas Priest, and I was glad to say I got to see them because like I said before you and I started recording, these legend bands that are making the rounds, you don't know if it's going to be the last time you see them. I mean, I would love to say, hopefully we'll see them in a couple of years, but, it was a little bit of time between Firepower and now, and, I don't know what's going to happen afterwards.
Well, that's true. The night that we seen them, it was a sold-out show.
Yes,
so,
on a Sunday night.
On a Sunday night even. They've been advertising, like, more and more shows are starting to sell out. And we talked about this even on the other show, that there is a mentality right now, especially with some of the older legacy bands, that people are like, I got to go see them because you just don't know. And members are dropping off and disappearing and, whatever, and you have barely anybody left, and you're getting to see them do the old stuff. It's just amazing.
You're listening to Cosmic Talk with Chris Natalini and Mick Michaels.
To kind of double back a little bit to Panic Attack, the second time that I started listening to it, in my head I go, you know what? This is kind of like the slap in the face to KK's Priest, because I felt like they were they were doing the one-up on them, right? Like playing that game. Like, okay, if you're going to come out and try to do Painkiller-like stuff that KK seemed to be trying to do, well, then the band that did it and the singer that did it will do another version of it. So when I was, hearing the chorus, I'm saying to myself, this just seems like the one-up on Ripper's vocals and stuff like that. I understand why you're doing it, right? It's kind of like after Turbo came out and then some of the backlash that the band experienced, simply because Turbo came out before the hair metal rush started happening.
Right.
This is where everybody goes, oh, it was a misstep on their part. They didn't see. No, they were actually ahead of the game. They seen what was coming. They got to the mound before everybody else, but unfortunately, the balls weren't. But here's the thing. That tour for them, that Fuel for Life tour, was super, super successful.
Yes.
I mean, it really opened up their catalog to a much larger audience, right?
Yes.
So anyway, when they came out with Ram It Down, excluding Johnny Be Good, that was like, hey guys, we can still do this. It was a proof, like, hey, I can still do this. Ram It Down's an amazing album. And
it's overlooked.
It is overlooked because of Johnny Be Good and because of that hair metal. It kind of was sandwiched right in the peak of it.
Yeah.
That whole Johnny Be Good thing was because they passed on Top Gun, so they weren't going to pass on again. But anyway, hey, listen, whatever works. I think that was a terrible movie, too, if I remember correctly.
It was.
Yeah, it didn't even do well.
The movie was awful.
It was awful. It was awful.
That's a movie we will not be talking about.
We'll definitely not be wasting our time. You know what I mean? Oh, man, I'll tell you. But then when Painkiller came out, Painkiller was kind of like a statement. It's like, hey, guys, you know what? We can compete with hey, we're still here, and we're now doing this. Which Painkiller, in my opinion, changed the landscape of how some of these bands wound up going in the 90s that wanted to stay hard and heavy and, because that's still that pivot point for a lot of music. Like, I mean, which, you had Painkiller, and then, even though I wasn't and still am not a fan of Pantera, then you had Pantera's album that came out in that early part of the 90s. That was the big shift for a lot of bands, in my opinion.
Right.
Bands, Bands like Slaughter and Firehouse and Warrant, they were on the radio, but they weren't the ones making the shift. They were the ones that were, getting part of the swept out, routine. But
yeah, once Pantera hit, it changed. Again, just like hair metal at the time, Pantera hit, it changed the landscape of metal. Yeah.
But I think that Painkiller was the precursor to that change in 1990 for them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was Priest. It was like it was like Priest version 2.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they were, there was just something about those songs and that their attitude during that time that was like, wow, it was almost like they recreated Priest.
Exactly.
In a weird way, yeah.
I mean, which led the way to bands like Dream Theater and then Fate's Warning and that kind of stuff to get more prominence.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. And I think, too, that what Priest did, and I know we're supposed to be talking about, but this is a retrospect on Priest 50 years, the way I look at it. What they did with Ripper, it threw a lot of people off, including me. But once again, I feel now, looking back, they were ahead of the game. They were doing something.
Yep.
Because in metal in the 90s was struggling. It was really struggling because,
it was.
Rap had really come up by 98, 99. The Latin explosion here in America was, Mark Anthony and Livin' La Vida Loca and all that kind of stuff was just going nuts. Jennifer Lopez, all that kind of stuff. The metal that we knew wasn't there anymore. And so, you still had grunge, and the alternative type stuff was still kind of making an impact, and it was all over the radio. So I think that they were ahead of the game. It's hit or miss. It's kind of like a 50-50 split with people for that era.
Yep.
I'll be honest with you, out of the gate, I didn't necessarily dig it. It wasn't bad, but I was like, well, this isn't the Priest. Because I still had, again, and I've said this before, like when I first think of Judas Priest, like Stained Class comes to mind. It's actually the Les Binks years. Stained Class, Killing Machine, and the live album, Unleashed in the East. That's what I think of Priest. Yeah. Then I jump to everything else that kind of follows from there. And if you think about it, they made that switch with British Steel, and then they kind of changed a little bit for Point of Entry, and then they heavied up in a weird kind of way for Scream for Vengeance, and then Defenders of the Faith was a different album, and that wasn't necessarily accepted right out of the gate. It wasn't accepted.
Right.
But you look back at that album now, because again, they released Free Will Burnin', which was just that may have been what really started out speed metal, not necessarily Fast as a Shark, or the combination of the two.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Then they released Eat Me Alive, which was probably the least of the songs on that album, though now, again, going back over time, you realize it's a really good song.
Yeah.
But you got songs like The Sentinel and Jawbreaker and like, oh my God, Heads Are Gonna Roll. It's just a phenomenal album.
It is. It is. I think that, and I'm with you, I got into Priest obviously a little later. The first Priest record I had was Unleashed in the East. And then it was Killing Machine, kind of like where you are with Priest. And, I always felt like Priest was one of those bands that this is no means to be offensive. But I feel like Priest was one of those bands that sometimes some of their records don't hit you right away. Sometimes they take 2 or 3, maybe 4 listens, and then you go, holy crap, this thing is genius. Like it is. And that's kind of how I felt with, with Turbo Lover. Didn't like it at first. Gave it a couple listens, and then after some time, boom, that sucker hit, and I went, oh yeah, like this album is amazing. And I feel like they're just one of those bands that I feel differently with the Firepower and Invincible Shield and the last few that they've had. But even like Nostradamus, like even my first couple listens into that, I was like, what is this? And then after I listened to it a couple times, I'm like, okay, I get it. This is pretty amazing. I feel like a lot of their catalog, especially in the later year, in those middle years, is one of those things where you hear it and you go, let me give it a couple listens, kind of like you were with
Panic Attack.
Panic Attack. Thank you. Yeah.
No,
you had to listen to it a couple times.
I agree with you. So here's the thing, right? Like it's Priest every single album. But every album is different. It's almost like each time they kind of reinvented themselves. Like there's people that constantly have this argument and or debate that, you go back and listen to the first album of Priest and they're really not a heavy metal band, they're more of a progressive band. It's like, well, that's almost like, what magazine or website did you take that out of? Like, no crap. Because at the time, it really wasn't heavy metal at the time, right? It was just hard rock and everybody. But you go back to that first album, Rock-A-Rolla. That's an incredible album. Does it have a little bit of groove at times?
Really
yeah, but that's what, and then the other thing is like, well, they've done it with, actually all those songs were written with a different singer. Well, listen, so what? You know what I mean? Does it make a difference? Right. I don't, no, it doesn't. It's what it is there. I remember there was a time I spent months and months listening to Rock-A-Rolla over and over again. And, I loved those first 3 albums. Sad Wings of Destiny. Come on, man. There's classics on there, number 1. But that's just incredible. And Sin After Sin, Starbreaker. Come on. Are you kidding me? You're just talking, and I've seen them do some of them songs in modern time with distortion and mics and stuff like that. You know what? It sounds heavy metal to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
They didn't have that sound back then because, look, even Kiss, They complained about, there's our Kiss, we're back into it. Now we just got to get Christmas into this episode. Like, they complained that, they didn't have the sound that they wanted to have on those first couple records. Well, so, and you've heard that time and time and time again. What they were getting in person was volume. And volume helped the live setting. It changed the intensity, the impact. They couldn't get that on the records. They weren't the only band. Tons of bands experienced the same thing. And that was just a statement at the time, it's testament to that production just wasn't up to what people were hoping they could achieve, right? But you go back and take that out of the equation, and like you're saying, you listen to them and you start really diving into them. You're going, oh my God, the genius of that chord progression, the genius of that vocal arrangement, the genius of just the arrangement of the song and what they did. It doesn't matter the distortion, right? I mean, it's not heavy metal because of the distortion, or the guy wasn't, using a trigger drum set with double bass and, blast beats. Come on, you got to be kidding me. Stop it. But I think that they were a band that each album, they weren't afraid to experiment. And now going back to what you were saying about Turbo, I always liked the album. Back in 86 and 87, I did think it was it was commercial for what we were used to hearing from Priest, but at the same time, go back to British Steel, and that was their venture into commercialism. Right? They left the progressive. Yeah. They got down. They used the same 3 chords in the same position to write an entire album, and it worked. Right? They realized that simple works. And what did they do? They ushered in basically a whole new genre, a whole new wave of British heavy metal. I remember coming back to Turbo years later. CD, had it in the car, at the time when a lot of the old stuff was all remastered and then was re-released on CDs, right? And they had deluxe stuff and extra songs. I had that thing blaring, and I'm like, oh my God, his vocal ability at that time was just like you could hear the power in his voice. It was like, holy crap. And then when you hear, again, Turbo Lover, when you hear that thing live and they're kicking it in, oh man, come on. Locked In. I knew Locked In back then was an amazing song.
Oh, yeah. Yep. You had mentioned KK's Priest, too, and although both of those bands did Victim of Changes, we saw KK's Priest, they did it, and then you and I saw Judas Priest, and they did it. 2 totally different bands. And KK's Priest, as good as Ripper sounded, 100% how great he sounded. I felt like the show was about Ripper during that song. When we saw Priest do it, man, it was all about Priest. It wasn't about Halford and those notes, because he did hit the notes. I mean, he hit the notes that he could hit now, right? And obviously, with Ripper, he has age on his side. But I felt like when I saw KK's Priest do it, it was all about Ripper and his voice. Like, they had he felt like, I got something to prove. Like, dude, we all know you could sing. Like, we all know that. Where when Rob did it with Priest, when we saw him, man, he just laid back and they just killed that song. Just killed it. Even though Rob couldn't get as high as Ripper, he still nailed it, man, and it was beautiful.
I agree. I mean, again, you're going back to the source. Source. And again, you're having, like, Priest is a band that has done it in their repertoire for almost 50 years. Right? And KK just as much, but then you're talking about a band who is also now not Priest. There is a member and then a replacement member in the band that was in Priest. Doesn't make that band Priest. There's a difference. Right? The energy's different. What people are expecting is different. And then here's the thing. The funny thing is both of those guitar players, neither of them were there in the original run, or the drummer, right? So, but I know what you're saying, because it's a band that, even though the players have been exchanged, that's a song they've always played. It's always been there. And I think that's the difference, and that's what hones it in. And then you're listening to it from the band who did it. And again, this could be where Eddie Trunk talks about, like, why would you go see a band that you love that there's no original members in it? But people will still, Quiet Riot, come on, Feel the Noise, or Autograph, and, it's turn up the radio. It's about the songs and what those songs.
It's about the songs.
I just recently seen Queensryche, And Todd talked as if, he was there on those early albums. I respect that because you're talking about the band, as long as he knows the difference. But he says, at one point he goes, we're selling memories because that's, at the end of the day, all we have left. It hit me. We're driving home, and I'm like, oh, my God, that's, that really is it. And that's why, I'm going to end this with this, that's why a bad cover band still gets applause. Because, and believe me, recently I seen some really bad cover bands that I was shocked and almost embarrassed, but I watched a crowd who was intoxicated go nuts because what that song represents in their mind, and it brings back. And we talked about that on the other show, that sometimes there's a displacement that happens, a little bit more than just displacement, maybe a loss of sanity. But I'm going to leave it at that. What else you got, bud? You want to add anything else?
No, brother, that's it. Judas Priest forever.
Yeah, go see it. Pick up the album. We don't get any residuals from it, but let them know that you heard it from Cosmic Talk. If you like that episode, check out some of our other episodes at www.thecosmicvoice.com and talk it up with us. Thanks so much for listening. This is Cosmic Talk.